It's been said that an organization's ability to grow and scale is highly correlated with the alignment of people, customers, and even product development around a core mission, vision, and value statement. So every organization has it, mission, vision, value statement. And yet, some organizations have a rock solid culture where the people, the products, the services, they are completely aligned with the vision, the value statements. And then there are organizations where the culture is toxic, or you are so excited to work for the organization because of their values. And then you get there and, well, you're a bit let down because the value statements aren't actually aligned with your work experience. So if you are in organizational development, learning and development, you're a leader of any sort in an organization, creating some sort of alignment between the work that you do, the environment that you work in, the products and services that you put out, and your relationships with customers, all of that has to do with how we're living and breathing the value statements and the vision of an organization. So how do we measure that? How do we know if we're aligned? How do we know what to do if we're not aligned? And how is measurement and evaluation a tool that can help us in this process of creating a more aligned organization? That is the focus of this case study, and I hope you enjoy. Hi, I am Dr. Elena Schlachta. I am the host of Measurement Made Easy, where we break down a challenge or an opportunity in the world of learning and development and measurement and evaluation, such that you have more skills, new ideas, and some new playbooks to help you measure and evaluate in whatever it is that you're trying to measure and evaluate. So in the next few minutes, we're going to talk about the process of evaluating the presence of the values inside of your organization. What does that process look like? Are you ready to roll up your sleeves? Not like I have any. And do the work to practice with an example statement of values, an example answer to the process questions, so that you're ready and prepared to do this on your own. I hope the answer is yes. The first step, and this might seem like common sense, but trust me, we overlook this step in a lot of our work, and that is, why do we care? You've got a list of 10 values, and you want to evaluate if those values are present in an organization. Why do you care? Why is it important? Why is it important for you right now? Are you a new organization who's just developed value statements and you're trying to monitor how they show up in the organization? Are you an organization that's been around for 100 years and times are changing, people are changing, mergers, acquisitions, new technology, a million things have happened? Are those values still present? Do they need to evolve? These are the kinds of things that we can do with great data from evaluation work. But the first part of the process is, why do we care? So, as I've done in a previous video, I've got a guide. So in this chapter, this section of the video, I don't want you to go any further in this process until you've written down, remember, handy dandy notebooks, write down in a notebook, write down in your digital note space, whatever you've got. I love sticky notes on my Mac computer. I have a million of them where I have different notes for different things. Write down. You want to evaluate the presence of values inside of your organization. Well, why? Why is it important? Okay, have you written something down? I surely have. So here are a couple of ideas I came up with for why now. Why might we be interested in evaluating the presence and how values are showing up in your organization? Here's one. We've heard of this before. Culture fit. Now, there are some awesome ways in which culture fit can be applied to an organization, and there are some really terrible ways in which culture fit can be applied to an organization. When I say culture fit, I don't mean that we all look like me or that we all look like you. What I mean is that we are all present together because we care about the same things. We care about integrity. We care about the vision and the mission of the organization. We care about how we work. I'll give you an example from a podcast that I listened to recently. It came from Uber. So at one time, this might be outdated, but at one time in Uber's history, they were unapologetically disruptive. They were unapologetically doing things differently and sort of a we don't care, we're going to go for it kind of attitude. And that, of course, was going to reflect in their culture because they were in a growth space, because they wanted or needed to be different, because the environment that Uber operates in demands that kind of hard and fast mentality. So you can imagine with that sort of value system, it would affect who we hire. It would affect how we develop them. It would affect the kinds of conversations that we have in an organization. And it affects the expectations. So when I say culture fit, I don't mean that we share the same skin color, that we share the same gender, sexual orientation, or country of origin or language. What I'm talking about is a subset of values and beliefs and a mission, an agenda that ties us all together. So that's one reason why we might care about evaluating the presence of values in an organization. But that's not it. There are many others. Here's a few other ideas. So differentiating yourself in the marketplace. There's a lot of ways in which organizations can differentiate themselves, and it's incredibly important in this hot market. There's a lot of people that do the work that I do. How am I differentiating myself? That oftentimes ties back to the values of why we're in business and the beliefs and the statements that drive me or drive you or whomever every single day. Quality of work. So there are certain values like integrity, like collaboration, like having a sense of community and trust. Those are things that affect how we work together as teams, how we give constructive feedback, the quality of the way that we work together. And then another is the quality of the product that we put out and the vendors that we might select and the time to delivery, time to value. There's some very specific statements of values and a vision of organizations that influences that type of thing. The answer to question number one, why do we care? Question number two is, what's the problem? So, why do we care? Probably if we dig a little bit deeper, there's a problem that's happening in the organization that's causing us to want to evaluate the presence or how people are experiencing the values in an organization. So, what is that problem? Put on your little investigator hat, go talk to a few people. Maybe you have some hunches of your own. Go validate those hunches. Go do a little quick needs analysis to just get some details about what's the problem that's going on. And please, please talk to different people. Talk to people on your team. Talk to people in different teams, different departments. If you're a global organization, talk to people in different localities if it makes sense to do so. So, backing up. Why do we care? What's the problem? Now for the next. What decision do we hope to make with the data that we're going to get? So I know you're probably thinking, what do you mean, what's the decision? My pushback to you is we should already have clarity on what we're going to do with the data once we get it. And here's why this is important. Because if we don't have an idea of what we're going to do with the data, we might go then work with the data that we've collected and realize we're missing something. Realize we didn't ask a couple of important questions. Maybe we should have worded the questions differently. Maybe they should be open-ended questions versus closed-ended questions. Maybe we should have added a few more answer options. You get where I'm going with this. If we have a clear idea of the decisions that we want to make once we have the data in hand, everything else gets a ton easier. So how do we want to use the data? What kind of decisions do we want to be able to make with the insights from the data? So that's our third question. Okay, so now we're at the place where we're ready to collect some data. And each one of you is probably chomping at the bit, waiting for my suggestion around how do we go do this thing. We've got all of the fundamental stuff that we need, why we care, what's the problem we're trying to solve, and what key decisions are we going to want to make with this data? That's the foundation. Without having done that, the data we collect might be completely wrong, and then we're kind of back to square one. We've wasted a lot of time, and that would just be a sad situation. So get your foundation right, and then you're ready to collect some data. So there are two ways that I would do this. First and foremost, if you don't already have this documented somewhere, it's a really fun but also important exercise, again, with key stakeholders, look at all the value statements of the organization. They're probably big things like we believe in integrity, we believe in collaboration, we show up, we take initiative, things like that. These are big words and they're well intended. And most of us, we feel something when we hear these words, and that's great. The most important thing to do is operationalize that. If you haven't operationalized your value statements into how are people incorporating that into their work, what does that look like? What kind of performance do we expect in living out the values? Now, one really fun thing that you could do, and it's a little time consuming, but the legwork's already there. Go ahead and look at your recent job descriptions. Like, go pull a bunch of random job descriptions. So they're not all the same job description, but different ones representing different roles. And you probably have written down somewhere those core characteristics, qualities, or sort of expectations that you want people to bring. So for example, being able to communicate with external clients expectations and manage those expectations in a project management situation. That would probably be an example of integrity, or it could be an example of transparency. So my suspicion is if you haven't already operationalized, well, what does it look like to be living and breathing those value statements? I bet your job descriptions have a ton of clues. So it'd be kind of fun. You could take 10 job descriptions and then go look at your list of values and pull things from those job descriptions that are just examples of what different roles would be doing to live out those values. And you'll get a quick sense of what are we missing? Maybe we're doing a great job operationalizing collaboration and integrity, but maybe we've totally missed the mark in thought leadership or innovation. So once you've got the operationalization, you like that big word? I hope I said it right. Once you've got that documented, you're ready to do the next thing. So now that you've operationalized your values, the next step is to figure out where can we go get data that helps us to validate the presence or lack thereof of these ways of being in the organization. And then what other data do we need to be able to answer the questions and to make the decisions that we want to make going forward? So there's oftentimes some data that we can find. For example, if integrity is one of, and this was the case at one of the organizations I worked at, integrity was one of our 10 values. And what that meant operationally was that people showed up on time. It was essential that the people in our organization showed up for their shifts on time, because you can imagine the cascade of consequences if people are constantly late. Now, that's not always an issue with different kinds of organizations. Remote employees, it doesn't matter maybe when they show up and when they leave, but in some instances, the starting on time or coming early is a very important way to operationalize integrity. So you could go find data on from whether it's from managers or maybe people clock in. And in fact, in our organization, we had a really specific way that people clocked in to let us know that they got to their shift on time. So how many people are showing up? What's the percent of people who are showing up on time? And where do we get the data to support the degree of showing up on time? Another example could be that when we start a new project with an external client, that there's a contract that gets sent and signed that sets the expectations of what our deliverables are going to be. And there's a conversation or at least documentation of what those expectations are. So it might be possible to track the contracts that have been sent. And is there a place where those contracts live on your internal server? And are there signed contracts in place for every single client in the last quarter or the last year or something like that? So there's going to be data that we can go find where we can take a look in the rearview mirror and see what's happened, what sort of ways of being and operating are happening in the organization, and are they aligned with the expectations in terms of what it is that we want to see, and making sure that that aligns with our values. That's the first step that I would take. Then I would look at the data that we have, or I would look at the data we're going to collect and say, does this help us answer the decisions that we want to make with this data? And more than likely, there are going to be some questions that you have to create and figure out the best way to ask those questions inside of the flow of work. So for example, I love doing little mini survey projects inside of team meetings. And so I'll create a package for people that says, here's why we're doing this. Here are the expectations. Here's what we plan to do with the data. It's going to be anonymous or it's not, depending on the needs of your particular investigation. And then you have team leaders facilitate. I love doing things like Typeform, Jotform, Microsoft Forms, Google Forms, whatever. You create an anonymous or not survey, and then you have people go on their phones and they just answer the questions. And if you want to look at the data together as part of a discussion, great. If not, then you do it inside of a team meeting and then it's done. And the team leader is able to share in person the context around why collecting that data was important. So if for some reason you can't do that, I would also suggest, of course, you can do this team meetings virtually or in person. If that's not a possibility, then I suggest using surveys and disseminating them with the best context possible, such that people really understand why you're asking for the data, how soon it has to be completed, and what you plan on doing with it to help their lives or their experience in the organization. And as much as I'd love to share with you an example of what this looks like, I don't want to mislead you, because the reality is when we do this kind of work, we're going to have different decisions we need to make. And so there's not a standard procedure in terms of the kinds of questions to ask. What I'll leave you with is that collecting two types of data: the hard data that we have access to that looks backwards, like are people showing up on time? Are they submitting contracts and uploading them so that everybody can see what those contracts are? Those kinds of things that the data is there, we just have to go find it. And then what additional questions do we need to ask? Do it focus group, do surveys, whatever makes sense to help us make those key decisions, to help us solve the problem around evaluating the presence of values in an organization. These videos are meant to be a starting place just to get you thinking. And of course, we have a comment section and we have a live community where once you start doing this thinking and you start preparing the evaluation work, we are here. You don't have to do this alone. Please use the comment section below these videos and feel free to show up to our community of practice, which is listed down below in the description of this video. And we wish you the best of luck as you continue improving your programmatic outcomes and the culture of your organization by using measurement and evaluation as a tool. Stay tuned for the next video, and we'll see you there.